Crimson Pass lit up across Cassian Drake's NAV display in sharp red letters as his ship entered the asteroid field. A fitting name for a mission that only fools or the desperate would attempt. The shattered remains of countless vessels glittered among the rocks, a graveyard of ambition and defeat. Course adjustment recommended, the AI droned. Probability of survival at current trajectory, 19.2%. Cassian's grip tightened on the controls. Override safety protocols. Manual control engaged. His small scout ship weaved through the massive, tumbling rocks, each maneuver skirting the edge of disaster. Somewhere in this maze of stone and wreckage lay his target, a derelict research station that hadn't transmitted in years. A flash of memory disrupted his focus. Kira's terrified scream as their ship's hull gave way. Vargas reaching for the emergency seals, too slow to save them. Focus, he muttered, steering hard to avoid a jagged fragment hurtling toward him. The ship's frame groaned under the strain, and sweat dripped from his forehead. He exhaled sharply, his breath syncing with the erratic pulse of the engines. Warning. Critical mass detected ahead. A massive asteroid loomed into view, dwarfing his ship. Behind it, just visible, was his destination, the station. Calypso, show me a gap, he ordered the AI. The display highlighted a narrow passage between two tumbling rocks, barely wide enough for his ship if he twisted it sideways. A maneuver that had killed better pilots than him. Calculate entry vector. Unable to compute safe approach. Recommended action. Abort mission. Cassian let out a bitter laugh. When has that ever stopped me? Ignoring the warnings, he rotated the ship. Metal shrieked as the hull scraped against jagged edges, and red lights flooded the cockpit. For a moment, he was back on Aurora's fate, the ship he'd lost. The screams, the silence that followed, his fault. Always his fault. He cleared the asteroid with inches to spare. Ahead, the station loomed, a silent monument to humanity's abandoned ambitions. Command, this is Drake. Target in sight. Beginning docking procedures. The reply crackled through the comm, acknowledged. And Drake, try not to die out there. We need that data. The word need echoed in his mind. Everyone needed something from him these days. Missions no one else would take, answers no one else could find. The docking clamps engaged with a shuddering clang. Cassian suited up, the motions automatic, his mind elsewhere. When was the last time he'd spoken to another person face to face? When was the last time he'd wanted to? The airlock cycled, and he floated into the station's dim, abandoned corridors. His helmet light cast long, shifting shadows over metallic surfaces coated in dust. Beginning search pattern alpha, he reported, though he doubted anyone was truly listening. The mission was simple enough. Recover data on temporal anomalies and their effect on human cognition. But as Cassian sifted through the station's terminals, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Just debris, he muttered. Still, his light tracked toward a viewport. For a heartbeat, he saw his reflection, but wrong. The face staring back was colder, harder. A man stripped of humanity, more machine than flesh. He blinked, and it was gone. Drake, we're getting strange readings from your location. Everything okay? Affirmative command. Just ghosts? An hour later, his storage drive was loaded with salvageable files. Most were corrupted, but a few hinted at groundbreaking research on temporal memory decay. As he prepared to leave, a sharp headache throbbed behind his eyes. What was I doing here? For a terrifying moment, Cassian couldn't remember why he was on the station or what he was supposed to do. Then the memory returned, but the fear lingered. These episodes were happening more often. Command, I'm heading back. Priority message acknowledged. The return through the asteroid field was strangely uneventful. It felt as if the rocks had shifted to clear his path, or maybe he simply cared less about surviving now. The command center was as sterile as ever. Officers avoided his gaze. The crazy pilot who took death-defying missions, the man who lost his crew. Admiral Morrow waited in her office, her face grim. Sit down, Drake. He stayed standing. I have the data. This isn't about the mission. She gestured to a chair, her tone firm. We need to talk about your medical report. Cassian's jaw clenched. I'm fine. You're not. She slid a tablet across the desk. The memory lapses. The headaches. They're getting worse, aren't they? He stared at her, the room tilting slightly. That's impossible, he whispered. Sand forgetfulness only affects settlers in deep space colonies. It's spreading, she said softly. And you've been exposed. Maybe on that mission with your crew. Don't. The word came out harsher than he intended. There might be a solution. No. The Nareen, she continued, ignoring him. I don't deal with aliens. They have a treatment, something that could stop the progression, or even reverse it. But they've requested you specifically. Cassian laughed bitterly. Let me guess, because of my sparkling personality? Because of your psychological profile? Something about your resilience? Or my death wish? This isn't a suicide mission, Cassian. It's a chance to save yourself and others. The headache returned, blurring the edges of his thoughts. Kira's laughter. Vargas's bad jokes. He couldn't lose them. Not again. When do I leave? The Nareen homeworld was breathtaking. Violet skies stretched overflowing, organic structures that seemed alive, gleaming like molten silver under a sun that shone too brightly. Cassian's ship descended toward the largest of these structures, a palace of alien grandeur. A delegation waited for him. Their purple skin shimmered like satin, their dark hair cascading like rivers of ink. At the center stood their queen. Cassian froze. Queen Serel was unlike anything he had imagined. Her violet skin seemed to capture the light, glowing softly. Her form was undeniably human, yet otherworldly, exuding power and elegance. Captain Drake, she said, her voice a melody laced with steel. Welcome to Nareen. I trust your journey was uneventful? Her subtle smirk told him she knew of his reputation. No one died, he replied dryly. I'll call that a win. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. I wonder, do you measure all your victories by survival alone? The question cut deeper than it should have. Cassian met her gaze, the air between them charged with something he couldn't quite name. Chapter 2. The Ritual. Cassian followed the delegation into the alien palace, his boots clicking against the smooth, mirror-like floor. The architecture defied logic, the walls appearing to flow and shift subtly, as if the building itself was alive. Queen Serel walked ahead of him, her movements impossibly graceful, her dark hair cascading like a living shadow over her shoulders. You're tense, Captain, Serel said without turning. Her voice was soft yet piercing, like the hum of a finely tuned blade. Is it fear or resentment? Neither, Cassian lied. She paused, her violet gaze locking onto his with an intensity that made his stomach tighten. You hide your thoughts well. A useful trait, for now. Without another word, she turned and continued, leading him deeper into the heart of the palace. The hallways grew warmer, the air heavier with an aroma Cassian couldn't place, sweet and sharp, almost metallic. Eventually, they reached a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The room glowed with a soft, golden light emanating from strange orbs suspended in the air. In the center was a massive, oval-shaped pool filled with a pearlescent liquid that shimmered like molten starlight. The milk of memories, Serel said, gesturing toward the pool. Cassian raised an eyebrow. Milk? You want me to bathe in that? Her lips twitched in amusement. It is not milk in the way you understand it. This is the essence of the Nareen. It connects us to our past, our present, and our future. If you wish to reclaim what you've lost and save what remains, you must immerse yourself. Cassian crossed his arms, his gaze skeptical. And what happens if I don't? Then your memories will continue to decay, Serel replied, her tone turning serious. You will forget everything, your crew, your missions, even yourself. Eventually, you'll become nothing more than a hollow shell. Her words struck a nerve. Cassian's hand instinctively went to his temple, where the dull ache of a headache had started to creep in. He thought of Kira, Vargas, and the others. Their faces were already fading, their voices growing fainter with each passing day. And what's the catch? He asked. You wouldn't need me for this if there weren't strings attached. Serel tilted her head, studying him. You are perceptive, Captain. Yes, there is a cost. The milk of memories will not only restore what you've lost, it will show you truths you may not want to see. Memories buried deep, truths about your crew, your mission, even yourself. Once you see them, there is no turning back. Cassian clenched his jaw. I don't care about the truth. I just want my crew back. I want to remember them the way they were. Then step into the pool, Serel said, her voice softening, and trust that you will find what you seek. Cassian hesitated. The shimmering liquid seemed to call to him, its glow pulsing faintly in rhythm with his own heartbeat. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, he removed his boots and stepped onto the edge of the pool. The liquid felt warm as he dipped a hand into it, the sensation both soothing and unsettling. Do not resist, Serel instructed. Let it guide you. Cassian gave her one last wary glance before stepping into the pool. The liquid engulfed him, and he sank slowly, his body floating weightlessly. The warmth spread through him, penetrating every fiber of his being. At first, there was nothing but silence and darkness. Then the memories began. He was back on Aurora's fate. The ship vibrated under his feet, the alarms blaring as the hull ruptured. Kira's scream echoed in his ears, but this time, he saw something he hadn't before. Vargas, his hand on the emergency seal, hesitating. "Vargas!" Cassian shouted, but the man froze, his face pale with fear. The scene shifted. Now he was in the command center of the ship, standing over the controls. His own hands moved, inputting commands that he didn't recognize. What am I doing?" he whispered. "You sent them to their deaths," a voice said. Cassian spun around to find Serel, standing in the memory, her violet eyes piercing through him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "I was trying to save them." "Were you?" she asked. "Or were you protecting yourself?" The memory blurred, then reformed. This time, Cassian saw himself standing in an escape pod, the door sealed behind him. Kira's face appeared on the other side of the glass, her expression a mix of anger and betrayal. "You left us," she mouthed, her words inaudible but devastating. Cassian thrashed in the liquid, trying to surface, but the memories wouldn't release him. When he finally emerged, gasping for air, the chamber was silent. Serel stood at the edge of the pool, her expression unreadable. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. Cassian climbed out of the pool, his body trembling. "It wasn't my fault," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It couldn't have been." Serel stepped closer, her gaze softening. "The milk does not lie, Cassian, but it does not show the whole truth either. The rest is up to you to discover." He sank to his knees, his hands shaking as he pressed them to his face. The faces of his crew were clearer now, but so were the memories of his mistakes. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Now," Serel said, kneeling before him, "you decide what kind of man you want to be. The Nareen can help you, if you let us." Cassian looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of anger, pain, and desperation. "And if I say no, then you will leave as you are," Serel replied. "Broken, dying, forgotten." The choice was his. And for the first time in a long time, Cassian didn't know what to do. Chapter 3: Unraveling Threads. Cassian sat in silence, the weight of Serel's words pressing down on him like an anchor. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, each memory clashing with the next. His crew's faces, their voices, had all returned, clearer now, but so had the dark truths. He could feel them gnawing at the edges of his mind, demanding to be faced. But how could he? Serel remained kneeling before him, her violet eyes steady, unwavering. She seemed to wait for something, his decision, his acceptance, his understanding. But all Cassian could hear was the sound of Kira's voice, echoing in his head. "You left us. You're a fool. You know that?" Cassian muttered, shaking his head, running a hand through his damp hair. He felt unmoored, lost in the depths of the milk's revelations. He had wanted answers, but now that he had them, they only seemed to drown him. "Perhaps," Serel replied quietly, "but perhaps the greatest fools are those who never look beyond the surface. We all have our truths, Cassian. Yours are simply more painful." Her voice was neither cruel nor pitying. just a statement of fact. There was no judgment in her tone, only an unspoken invitation to step into a new path, one that would require everything of him. Cassian stood abruptly, the sudden motion making his head spin. The memories swirled around him like a storm, the faces of his crew, and his failure, clawing at his soul. His stomach churned with guilt, and the headache, once a dull ache, flared to life again, sharper and more insistent. He reached up, massaging his temples. "I never wanted any of this," he said hoarsely, eyes closed tight. "I never wanted to be the one to lead them into that hell. I thought," he stopped himself, fighting the rising tide of emotion. "Cassian," Serel said, her voice soft, yet piercing through the fog in his mind. "You did not choose to be here, but now that you are, you must decide how to face what you've done. The Nareen can help you rebuild, but we cannot carry your burdens for you. You must choose how you want to move forward." Cassian turned sharply to face her, the anger flaring in his chest again. "I didn't want to move forward. I didn't want to survive. But you've dragged me into your mess. What am I supposed to do now? Can your people even fix me? Or is this just another attempt to make me part of your game?" Serel rose, her movements calm, fluid. She didn't flinch at his anger. If anything, it seemed to amuse her. "The Nareen do not play games, Cassian. We offer solutions, and we offer choices. The rest is up to you." Cassian turned away from her, pacing in a tight circle. He needed to think, to process, but the weight of everything pressed in on him. The past, the present, and now this unknown future that Serel had offered him. The milk had shown him his faults, his failures, but also the consequences of those mistakes. Kira's face flashed before him again, just like it had in the pool. "You left us." He could still hear it, her voice distorted with the pain of betrayal. He had abandoned them when it mattered most. He'd save himself. That was the truth. But it's not too late to fix it. The thought startled him. Could he fix it? Could he make up for what he had done? Or had he already sealed his fate? The silence in the room was suffocating. He could feel Serel's gaze, heavy but patient. He couldn't escape it, couldn't escape her now. The milk had tied him to something much larger than himself. "I don't know what you want from me, Serel," he muttered, rubbing his temples again. "I'm broken, and I don't know if I can be fixed." "You're not broken, Cassian," Serel said, her voice unyielding but softer now. "You're lost, and that is the first step toward finding your way again. But you must want it." He turned back toward her, meeting her gaze with equal parts defiance and vulnerability. "And if I don't? What happens then?" She stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. "Then you fade. You become another empty husk, a man haunted by his own failures, forever unable to move past them. But you are not alone in this, Cassian. You have an Nareen. We can show you a way to move beyond the weight of your past. If you are willing to accept it." He shook his head, the pounding in his skull growing worse. "And what do I have to do in return?" "There is always a price for knowledge," Serel replied, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. "But in this case, the price is simple. Your trust." Cassian stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words settling over him. Trust. It was a currency he had spent carelessly in the past, given to those who didn't deserve it. And now he was expected to trust an alien queen who claimed she could help him? Could he do it? Could he place his faith in her, in them, to give him the chance to undo the damage he'd done? "I'll need more than just your words, Serel," he said finally, his voice steady but edged with uncertainty. "If you expect me to trust you, I need to know why you're doing this." "Why me? Why now?" Serel didn't flinch. She met his gaze without hesitation, her eyes full of the kind of understanding that made him uncomfortable. "Because you are the key, Cassian. The Nareen have studied human psychology for millennia. You are unique, your mind, your resilience, your capacity for growth. You have been chosen because you can overcome the greatest obstacle, yourself." Cassian felt a chill run down his spine. Chosen. The word echoed in his mind, but there was no comfort in it, no relief. "I'm not sure I want to be chosen," he muttered. "I don't believe you," she replied, her voice firm. "But you will understand in time." Serel turned away, signaling to a group of attendants who had silently entered the chamber while Cassian was lost in his thoughts. They brought with them a strange, shimmering device, a neural interface, the shape of a delicate crown. "Tonight, you will sleep, Cassian," Serel said, her tone now more final. "We will help you regain what is yours, and in doing so, we will show you how to begin again. The choice is still yours, but understand this. Once the process begins, there is no turning back." Cassian eyed the device, his gut tightening. His heart raced, his mind fighting to process what was happening. But despite his doubts and his fears, something within him stirred. Something primal and desperate for resolution. He had nothing left but his own will, and if he didn't take this chance, he might lose it all. "Fine," he said at last. "Let's do it." As the attendants placed the device on his head, the familiar hum of foreign technology filled the air. Serel's voice, calm and steady, followed him into the darkness. "Rest, Cassian. Tomorrow, your true journey will begin." Chapter 4. Through the Veil. Cassian awoke with a start. The air was thick and warm, the faint scent of metal and unfamiliar flowers lingering in his senses. His body felt heavier than usual, the weight of it pressing him into the plush bed beneath him. The crown-shaped device from the night before was still in place, its delicate tendrils gently pulsing against his scalp. He reached up instinctively to remove it, but a soft voice stopped him. "Leave it." He turned his head toward the source. Serel stood in the doorway, her violet skin shimmering in the dim, golden light of the room. Her presence was as commanding as ever, but now there was something softer in her demeanor. It was as if she was waiting for something, perhaps him. "Does it hurt?" she asked, stepping closer. Cassian blinked, his hand hovering near the neural device. It didn't feel like it was attached to his mind anymore. The pain from his previous headaches had faded, leaving only a faint buzz in the back of his thoughts. "It's strange," he admitted, "like my brain is being pulled in a dozen different directions at once." Serel's lips curled into a subtle smile, as if she understood something he didn't. "The process has begun. Your mind is adapting, connecting with what it was always meant to be. It's natural to feel disoriented. The veil between your past, present, and future is thinning." Cassian frowned. "The veil? The veil of memory," she explained, her voice smooth, like silk sliding over stone. "In time, you will learn to see things differently. You will understand your own mind and the threads that weave it together. Your memories, they are not what you think they are." Cassian rubbed his temples again. "I'm not sure I understand." "You will," she said, her voice both reassuring and distant. "But first, you must understand the price of what you're seeking." He didn't like the way she said that. His stomach twisted, and the words price and seeking echoed ominously in his mind. But before he could ask her what she meant, a sudden clarity filled the room. It was as if the very air shimmered with purpose. Without warning, the walls of the room seemed to vanish, replaced by endless layers of shifting light and dark. Cassian gasped, his pulse racing. The room no longer felt real. He wasn't sure where he was anymore, or even who he was. "Relax, Cassian," Serel's voice floated to him, calm amidst the chaos. "Let go of your fear. You've crossed into the space between realities. Your mind is unmooring from the past. This is the beginning." His breath hitched. This felt like something ancient, something far beyond his understanding. He was adrift in a sea of light, his body weightless, unable to distinguish up from down. His senses were no longer anchored in the physical world. The walls around him, no, the entire universe, seemed to shift, folding in on itself, like the very fabric of existence was unraveling before him. He reached out with his mind, desperate for something to hold on to. The past. My crew. Images rushed forward. Fragments of memories, fleeting glimpses of Aurora's fate, of Kira, Vargas, Jenkins, Thompson, appeared before him, like broken shards of glass, sharp and distorted. He saw himself again, but in different moments. The corridors of the ship, the bridge, the faces of his crew, frozen in time. But as each image flashed, it shifted and warped. Kira's face twisted in confusion, then anger. Vargas's body, slumped against a wall, a trail of blood dripping from his lips. Thompson, kneeling, trying to fix the ship, his face a picture of frantic determination. "No!" Cassian muttered, his voice breaking. "What is this? What's happening?" "This is not the past, Cassian," Serel's voice echoed around him. "This is the truth. The things you've forgotten, the lies you've told yourself, they are unraveling now. You must face them if you are to move forward." The images continued, blurring together in a kaleidoscope of emotion and confusion. Cassian saw his own actions reflected in those memories. Each choice, each hesitation, each moment of weakness. He saw the point when everything had gone wrong. He had chosen survival over loyalty. He had abandoned them. The pain of it hit him like a physical blow, a jagged spike that pierced through his chest. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His hands reached up, but it felt like they weren't his. They were foreign, unfamiliar. "Stop it," he cried out, his voice raw, trembling. "I didn't mean it." "You don't remember." Serel's voice came through the chaos, soft, almost sad. "You don't remember what you did, what you chose. But that is the price, Cassian. The truth comes at a cost. You will see what you did, but you must accept it. Only then can you move forward." "No," Cassian whispered, his breath ragged. I can't accept this. Not the truth. I can't live with it." Serel's presence surrounded him, her voice like the wind, distant and comforting. "You're already living with it, Cassian. You have been for so long. The question is, will you continue to run from it, or will you face it and choose to rebuild?" "I don't know if I can," he muttered. "You can," she said. "The milk of memories has shown you what was. Now it is time to show you what can be." Suddenly, the images stopped, the kaleidoscope of memories halting with a sharp crack. Cassian was standing in the center of the room once more, the weight of reality returning. The golden light flickered, and the room seemed to solidify, as if the fabric of space and time itself had folded back into place. He was back in Serel's chamber, but now everything felt different. "You were right," Cassian said, his voice quieter now, as the sharp pang of guilt receded just a little. "I abandoned them, but I was trying to survive. And that is the truth you must accept," Serel said, her voice steady but no longer cold. "Now, with that truth, you can move forward. But first, you must decide what you want to rebuild." Cassian nodded slowly. There was no going back, no undoing the damage he had caused. The memories of his crew, the faces, the moments, were etched into his mind. But now he was beginning to understand something deeper, something about who he had been and who he could still be. "I don't know what I can rebuild," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I know I can't keep running from myself." Serel's lips curled into a soft smile. "Good. You are already on the right path." Chapter 5. The Price of Rebirth. Cassian sat in the chamber's center, feeling an unfamiliar stillness wash over him. The weight of what he had experienced, the memories, the guilt, the revelations, had not yet fully settled. He had faced the truth of his past actions, and though it had been a painful and humbling journey, there was a strange kind of relief that came with acceptance. Serel was standing by the doorway, her violet skin glowing under the dim light of the chamber. Her presence was calming now, no longer an intimidating force, but a guide, a keeper of wisdom. She studied him carefully, her eyes piercing yet empathetic. "You have embraced the truth, Cassian," she said softly. "Now, you must choose how to move forward." Cassian looked at her, feeling a knot in his chest loosen. "How?" he asked. "How do I rebuild when everything I've done feels broken?" "You rebuild by understanding that nothing is truly broken," Serel replied, stepping closer. "You have the power to shape your future. And more importantly, you have the power to shape who you become." Her words struck him deep in his core. He had always believed that the past was a chain, dragging him backward, locking him in place. But what if he could shatter those chains? What if he could forge a new path, free from the weight of his mistakes? Cassian stood up, his legs a little shaky, but steadying himself with each passing moment. "And if I fail again?" he asked, his voice strained with the fear that lingered just beneath the surface. "Failure is not the end," Serel said with a gentle smile. It is merely another step in the process of becoming. You cannot avoid failure, but you can choose how you respond to it. That is the power you hold now. Cassian took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. He had spent too long running, hiding from his mistakes, from his past. But now he understood that he could move forward. He had to, for himself, for his crew's memory, and for the chance to make things right. I understand, he said, his voice steadying with each word. And I won't run anymore. Serel's eyes softened. Good. But remember, Cassian, you are not alone in this. There are others who will help you, if you allow them to. Her words hung in the air, a promise and a warning. For the first time since he had arrived on this strange world, Cassian felt the weight of his loneliness lift. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about learning to live again, to find a way to connect with others, whether human, alien, or something in between. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. Serel inclined her head, her eyes glinting with a quiet pride. It was not me who saved you, Cassian. It was you who found your way back. Now, you must decide what happens next. Cassian turned toward the door. The weight of his past was still there, lingering like a shadow at the edges of his mind. But now it no longer defined him. He had faced it, and he had survived. Come with me, Serel said, her voice sharp but gentle. There is something you must see. Cassian followed her through the winding corridors of the Faren palace, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The palace seemed endless, an architectural wonder that blurred the line between organic and artificial. But in the quiet, Cassian could feel his mind returning to itself. The pieces were coming back together, slowly, gently, like a shattered mosaic being reassembled. They came to a chamber at the heart of the palace, its walls lined with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with energy. At the center of the room was a strange pool, a shimmering liquid that resembled milk, glowing softly with a warm, inviting light. What is this? Cassian asked, his voice low with awe. This is the milk of rebirth, Serel said, the essence that flows through the veins of our people. It is through this that we heal, that we transform. It can undo the damage of memory, but it can also guide the mind through its deepest fears and regrets. Cassian stepped closer, feeling the pull of the liquid, its warmth beckoning to him. He had bathed in the milk before, in a symbolic gesture of the Faren culture, but now it felt different. This time it wasn't about the ritual. It was about something more profound, something personal. You've told me before that I must rebuild, he said, his voice almost a whisper. But can it help me rebuild me? Serel met his gaze, her eyes filled with ancient wisdom. It can help you find the pieces you've lost, but it will not do the work for you. The milk can guide you, but you must choose the path yourself. Cassian nodded, understanding. This was not an easy path. There would be no miracle, no sudden cure. But perhaps that was the beauty of it. He had the chance to change, not in spite of his past, but because of it. The milk would help him, yes, but it was his choices that would shape who he became. Slowly, he dipped his hands into the shimmering liquid, feeling it flow around him like a living thing. It was warm, comforting, and somehow ancient. He closed his eyes as the milk seeped into his skin, feeling it wash over him, through him. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. The memories of his crew, of their lives and their deaths, were no longer a burden. They were a part of him, his past, yes, but not something that would define his future. When he opened his eyes, Serel was still there, watching him with an unreadable expression. What now? He asked. Now you move forward, she replied. The milk has done its part, but the rest is up to you. Cassian looked at the shimmering liquid one last time before stepping away. The weight of his past still lingered, but it no longer defined him. The choices he had made, the mistakes he had carried for so long, those were no longer chains. They were lessons. And as he left the chamber, with Serel at his side, Cassian Palmer felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The path was open, and for the first time, he was ready to walk it. The end.